Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryang Karavavahe Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. What is the connection between Krishna suddenly telling Arjuna about the nature of I and Arjuna's confusion about doing his duty? What is that connection? Why did Krishna suddenly start to tell Arjuna about the nature of I? And the answer is because we have two questions in life. So the reason I'm saying this now is I want to make sure we have a context, how the Gita actually starts. If we don't have this context, then the Gita is not going to be as valid or relevant in your life as it could be. So before beginning anything, we need to establish that framework that we often miss when we just delve right into a text, which often happens. So we have two general questions in life. The first one is situational. So what is a situational question? What is a situational condition? Well, for example, should I? That's it. Should I? Should I marry? Should I have another child? Should I send him to this school or that school? Should I go visit my friend? Should I go and have a chiropractic massage? Should I go to this doctor or that doctor? Should I do a tooth filling? Should I negotiate? How should I negotiate? Should I go to the bathroom? When should I eat? What should we eat? So it's generally a should kind of situation. And most of these are basically trying to make us live the best that we can in life. So we're not negating this. We're not saying you shouldn't ask these questions. In fact, you are today where you are because most of your questions have gotten you to a successful life because of these should I. And it's understandable. We should ask this because how else are you going to live a successful life? So we're all for success in terms of relative success. However, we said last week that these situational questions, as much as they are necessary, they are arising out of an inherent insecurity. And we said that this insecurity is not the kind of psychological insecurity that you have when you go to a psychologist and say, treat this. This insecurity is that insecurity which blossoms all of the mini insecurities, all of the smaller insecurities. In other words, I am small. I don't know why I'm small, but I feel like I am small. I don't have a bigger purpose in this. In fact, what is my purpose? So it's this yearning to understand something bigger. However, it means what? It means that we're trying to do something to make us bigger, to go from small to big. That's it. Just bigger and bigger and bigger. How big? Well, we have no ending. Nobody wants to stop. No one's happy just stopping at a particular level and then say, I'm happy. In fact, if you do stop, eventually you want to look for more. You want to look for bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, how big? What kind of big? Physically big. You know, bigger muscles and bigger person. Emotionally big. So this means you want to be more of a emotionally balanced person. Maybe surround yourself with an environment that contributes to that emotional bigness. How else do you want to be big? You're intellectually big. So you want to maybe acquire some new degrees, maybe expand or refine your knowledge, which is okay. It's all okay. We're not against any of this. How else? Spiritually big. That means I want to be connected to something much greater than what I was connected to before. So we want to expand our idea of what we think big means. And now if you think about it, what is the ultimate definition of the Sanskrit word for the ultimate reality? It is Brahman. And what does Brahman mean? Big. So in other words, we're all inherently trying to be what we know ourselves to be, Brahman, big. And this is this pursuit for bigness, it's inherent. Otherwise, if it wasn't inherent, you wouldn't have the need to grow further. So our own behaviors for bigness gives away that we have inherent knowledge. It's not complete, but it's still there. And how do we know it's there? Because nobody stops improving. You always want to keep bettering. How much? No ending, limitless betterment. So that is why the word, see, Sanskrit words, they're so precise and beautifully constructed. That's why Brahman literally is appropriate. It's an appropriate word. How big? Limitlessly big. So most of our life goes into solving number one, these situational problems. And of course, nothing's wrong with this. However, it becomes a problem when all of our life goes just into that. Now, behind all of these questions, there is a fundamental question. And that fundamental question is common to all. So what is the fundamental question? Well, for example, mortality. See, this is not a situational where it applies just to one person, like in a situational, how do I improve my life over there? This is something that it addresses everyone. In other words, we all have to face this fact that this one day, sooner or later, this body will go. And what's going to happen then? Will I go out of existence? So these questions are fundamental. Another fundamental question is recognizing that not all of us are blessed equally. So if you look around you, you say, why is that person blessed? And this person is not as blessed. Like, why does someone get born with disabilities? You say, where is this coming from? What do they do to deserve this kind of treatment? So this is another fundamental question. It's much deeper than situational. Another is, you see that life is giving me A experience and it's giving you B experience. And then you ask, why is that? Why am I getting these? Why are two people born, twins, or even brother and sister, or brother and brother, sister and sister, and they have the same privileges, they have the same family, the same education, and yet their life goes in a totally different direction? And then you ask, what makes one person have this kind of experience and this person that kind of experience? So again, you want to see the deeper aspects of life. This is a fundamental question. Another one is, you see yourself as one of many. It means, why am I, I recognize myself as an individual here, but this I do not understand. Like, how am I now significant? So it again goes into this person, like, how am I actually significant if I'm just one person here? So this is another fundamental question. Or what is the cause of the universe? That's another fundamental question. So it's a much vaster, it requires a different kind of thinking, a little bit more mature thinking than situational, even though there's nothing wrong with situational. So fundamental questions are shared. They're shared across all. Sooner or later, everyone comes to these fundamental questions. Now the question is, how do you distinguish between fundamental and situational inquiry? It's very easy. A situational relates to just you. It's not a problem for another person, at least in that moment. Whereas a fundamental is common to the entire humanity. That means every human will undergo the process of physical death. So it relates to everyone. Now, what happens is we have two extremes. So this now ties back to that black or white thinking, how deeply ingrained it actually is in all levels of thinking. So what is this black or white thinking? It's either or. It's either like this or it's like that. For example, it's all situational. So 0% fundamental, 100% situational. Like, I don't need to address these fundamental questions. That's for the scientists. That's for the whoever. Me, I'm just I'm just a husband, I'm just a wife. I've got my job, I've got my little world to take care of. So it comes with a justification. But so does the other extreme. Now, what's the other extreme? It is to say, well, don't concern yourself with the world. I don't need to just discard everything because all is one. So that's the other extreme. And both of them are, again, going back to this black or white thinking. So you can see, even if one gets exposed to this knowledge, they still have this habitual, limited black or white thinking. And that thinking is the very obstruction to assimilating the bigger vision. That's why the last session was important, to understand this black or white thinking, because then it's going to sabotage by the time you hear this teaching, which we're now going to do in terms of what is the nature of I. So we can see that maturity is required to assimilate the big vision, for it to actually to take place. And again, if that habitual thinking of it's either like this or it's either like that, if it's carried over, then you're going to find yourself struggling, because you're going to start thinking, okay, now having heard this, let me now go to a different course of action. And then we start to ignore other parts that are really important also. So we have to be very careful not to fall into this trap of being this excited and then dropping everything else. We have to maintain that sense of balance in those areas that really do matter to you as an individual in your personal life. So the Gita deals specifically with both, not just one, but both. That is why the Bhagavad Gita is not a self-help. It is, okay, what is self-help? Self-help is a section which takes, or a field, which takes one particular area and it helps you to improve that. Nothing wrong with that. If you want to have a better memory, then you go to a self-help course on better memory. That's absolutely necessary for having a pleasant life. However, it doesn't encompass the big vision. And if it does, it usually focuses on just one topic, like the creation of the universe, but it doesn't address what came before the universe was here. Or quantum physics is the same thing. It addresses that point of the Big Bang. But what was before the Big Bang? So the Gita is that text which addresses not only the physical universe, not only your life, but also before the universe even manifested. Otherwise, if you leave one part out, question is going to still be in the back of your mind, and that's going to be as good as continuing the chase, continuing the seeking. That's why the Gita addresses all aspects in the past, present, and the future, not only on the macrocosmic, but also on the microcosmic, pertaining to you, the individual. So what's really important is to understand, when we talk about the Gita, you will notice a structure. Chapter 2 goes into fundamental. Chapter 3 goes into situational karma yoga. Chapter 4 and 5 is kind of a mixture. Chapter 6 on meditation is also a mixture. Chapter 7, fundamental. Chapter 8 on death, situational. Chapter 9, fundamental. So you can see the order, how the Gita is designed in such a way that it interchanges these two. So in the same way, whatever chapter we're on, you need to be very careful not to mix situational with fundamental. So if we're now talking with chapter 2, which is exclusively fundamental, you don't now bring questions about, well, let me now try to bring my life and see how it's going to fit here. So you need to isolate it while we're talking about either situational or fundamental. When we talk about situational, then the conversation about personal life opens up. When we talk about fundamental, then there is no space to bring in personal situational problems. We just focus on the bigger vision. This is how the Upanishads are designed. So this is another principle you need to understand before delving into the Gita. Because what happens is, if we get into a chapter and it brings us so many questions in the mind, and these questions usually about my life, my wife, about my job, about my business, and then we try to fit this into and say, okay, now how is this bigger vision, going to fix my business? You see that? That is not what we're supposed to do. In other words, when you're in chapter, whatever chapter deals with fundamental situational, you stick exclusively with that. Now, again, I want to bring the same question. The question was, what made Krishna speak about the nature of I when Arjuna found himself immobilized about the enormity of the situation? Why did Krishna suddenly speak about the nature of the I? The reason is because Arjuna gave 4 reasons, and those 4 reasons basically said, whether I win or lose, I actually lost. Does that sound like, is that a situational statement? Whether I win, okay, what is a situational statement? In a situational statement, you want a solution so that you can, quote, win. So you can win, so you can get something, so you can have a result to your favor. But Arjuna said, whether it is favorable or unfavorable, it is actually not favorable at all. So what does this mean? It means that Arjuna was able to see past situational. He's not looking for situational problems because he stated himself, whether I win or lose, I've actually lost. So there's nothing situational that you can now tell Arjuna that's going to please him. So therefore, what did Krishna say? Krishna said then he had no other choice but to then tell him the fundamental questions of life. So it's not like Krishna now selected, okay, I am the all-knowing, so I'm now going to choose what is best for Arjuna. He's simply responding to what Arjuna has said in his own words. So this means if someone comes up to you and says, hey, daddy, hey, mommy, help me, some bullies in school. You're not going to say now, well, let me tell you about how the universe was created, right? So, as you're going to respond appropriately to what the person is coming to you for. In this way, Arjuna didn't explicitly state he wanted the bigger vision, but he implied it by stating that whether I win or lose, I've actually not won. So then obviously the foundational has to begin. Now, then what happened was Krishna started out, in order to answer Arjuna's implicitly implied question, Krishna stated, the fundamental reality of you is the fundamental reality of everything else. So then, we used last week the wave-water analogy to demonstrate how that statement which Krishna made may be true. We say may be true because we're not trying to prove anything yet. We're only demonstrating to help the mind open up a possibility to what Advaita, what is the vision of Advaita, of non-duality, how everything is only one appearing as the many. So we're not expecting to prove anything or to show anything other than just that possibility. We also use that example to demonstrate that no wave actually ever dies. No wave in the ocean actually ever goes out of existence because it is never separate from itself. And what is itself? What's the content of itself? The one water, which is the truth of every other wave. So why are we saying this? We're saying this so that you need to isolate these examples to what the teacher says. What happens is when we mention an example in Advaita, the mind runs wild. And now it then goes, oh, okay, I get it. So I'm one of the waves. Okay, I know what you're saying, Andre. So it instantly now makes this pretext, it makes a conclusion, and it tries to fit the entire vision into one single example. This is not how the teaching works. The teaching, the example is only meant to demonstrate that particular section to what it is intended for. And I have just now told you what it was intended for. So what we now need to do is we need to bridge this understanding of this wave-water analogy. We need to bridge it to yourself. right now. How is this, how may this be true for me as a human being right now? Because we're not interested in some metaphors and some examples out there. See, the example of the wave water, that's very easy. But if you look at life, it's so much more complex than just this simple example. So now we have to address that, and we have to bring it into real life that we see with so many forms around us, including one of those forms being the person and whoever, you know, on that other side is. Okay. So this is now where we need to bring the teaching of the Upanishads to see what is the nature of the individual. So this is where this teaching comes in. Now the question is, what is this teaching? This teaching is one whereby it addresses, first of all, this entire reality, the one without a second. Now, in order to demonstrate, to show the wave, how it may be a little bit more than what it was perceiving itself to be, how it may be more than just this form called waviness, we need to apply a certain teaching, and that teaching is the subject-object teaching. Now, what is this subject-object teaching? Okay, so let's take the word object. What is an object? An object is anything that is perceived by you. An object is anything that is known to you. To you, just the person. Now, we have two means of knowledge to know any object. The first one is perception. Perception in Sanskrit is pratyaksha, just perception. And what is perception? What is pratyaksha? This is whereby we use our senses, that means our hearing, our nose, our eyes, to perceive or to validate the presence of an object, of anything. It could be of a smell, it could be of somewhere, something in the distance, it could be your phone ringing. Right now, you're looking at the screen that is done through your eyes, so on. So if I, for example, ask you right now, is there a flower? Okay, is there a car in your house, in your bedroom? You're gonna say, okay, suppose that, you know, you had to close your eyes and I put a car in your house, in your bedroom, a miniature car. And then I ask you, hey, is there a car in your room? You're going to say, okay, well, give me a moment, let me go walk in, let me check, let me open my eyes and validate the presence of a car, and then I will come back and I will tell you. So in other words, it requires me to use my 5 senses to validate the presence of an object. Now, the second means of knowledge is what we call perception-based inference. So what is perception-based inference? It means through prior perception, I postulate the existence of. What do I mean by this? Well, through prior perception, that means you have to use your perception in order to postulate a presence of something. For example, a crime detective can actually trace the origin of the bullet by looking at the angle, the entry angle of the bullet hole in the wall. So if you look at the hole, you can see, you know, the trajectory of from which way the bullet entered. By that, you can postulate where was the origin of that gunshot. So in other words, I first need to use my eyes. I need to see the hole, you know, and then by seeing the hole, I look at the data of that perception. And by that data, I then infer something that happened on the basis of that data. So that's why we call it perception-based inference. So once I use my perception, I then use logic to then further deduce a possibility as to what could have happened by the presence of that perception. Another example is a husband that carries an unidentified female aroma, right? It's like, you smell interesting. Where is this coming from? So in other words, you're using your nose, you're perceiving the aroma. On the basis of the aroma, you go, this is a unidentified object, unidentified flying saucer, flying around. And then you go, okay, so this means he may have contacted another female. Now, it's not like you see it's not like he's carrying a female on his head, or it says, I've been with a female. But on the basis of that information, on that perception, through your nose, you can deduce some possibilities what has happened. Another is, as for medical doctor, you come with a sharp kidney pain. And then the doctor is going to deduce some possibilities like, are you drinking water? Could it be a kidney stone? So the doctor will use some prior information, and then on basis of that will infer a possibility of why you're having this kidney stone. So this is why we call it, not only is perception required, but also once perception is used, then you use logic to deduce or to come to a possibility that may be true. So the summary is, every object requires these two means of knowledge, these two methods. Take any field, any amazing detailed field that we all have respect for, because like genetic research is an amazingly thorough and insightful and detailed field in itself, with so many details that I cannot obviously say because I'm not a genetic researcher. However, it is based on what? Perception and inference. Or a medical researcher, a medical specialist. They have not only this vast knowledge of all of the diseases or the conditions that can happen for the body, but how did this arrive? That's the question. How did you come up with this knowledge? Through perception of the body. So I look at the interaction between a virus and how it interfaces with the white blood cells, with the red blood cells, and I can deduce, okay, so this means on the basis of seeing this interaction, I can now deduce what would happen if this virus were to fully inherit the species. It would then cause this kind of destruction to the white blood cell or to the mitochondria, to the whatever. Or, quantum physics. Quantum physics is also an amazingly complex and respectable field, because it requires so much perception about the laws that we observe and inference. And then on the basis of that, we have this huge, beautiful field of itself. So every field in this world, in this, libraries and libraries of books, all of it is on the basis of perception and perception-based inference. Now, what about the subject? So we talked about the object. What about the subject? Now, suppose someone asks you, do you exist? Are you now going to reply, hold on, let me now go and check. Let me meditate on that. And then when I'm certain, I'll come back and I will tell you. Is that what you're going to do? No. You don't need 1 second to know that you exist. It's so obvious to you that it's just beyond question. So because this I am is always present, it is the only principle that doesn't, this self-revealing presence, it doesn't need to be verified. And it is the only presence that doesn't need that, whereas all of the objects do. So in other words, I don't need perception and I don't need inference to know that I exist. Even if you have a numb leg or a numb arm, right? You don't need, or a numb body. Some people get paralyzed and you still ask them, do you exist? They don't need to feel their body to say, yes, I exist. In other words, they still know they are. I still know I am, despite having a paralyzed body. So if this I am is evident, it's self-evident, a self-evident presence. If that is true, and we all know it, then why do you need the Upanishads? What place now does the Upanishads have to, because what is the I am? The implications of the I am are huge. It is the total reality. So now why do I need the Upanishads? The reason is because this self-revealing presence gets mixed up with the body. So now they're entwined. So that immediately brings confusion in life. Now, why is this mix-up true? Because from the moment we are born, we are preoccupied with what? Perception and perception-based inference. All life, our eyes go onto objects, or we are inferring, assessing, analyzing data on the basis of perception or inference. Therefore, we are conditioned, habitually conditioned, to spend all of our attention using these two primary means of knowledge. Therefore, we miss out on the I am subject. We just don't give it enough time to actually recognize who is this person that's actually always, behind all of these perceptions and inferences. Now, just to demonstrate this to you, your body condition in 10 years is yet to come. It's yet to come in 10 years. But does that mean that you don't know yourself right now? No. In other words, you don't need your body to be there in 10 years to know yourself right now. However, in 10 years, in that moment, I will be as convinced that's who I am as I am convinced right now. So if you change that standpoint, you can see how we trick ourselves. So right now, you look back, you look forward. No, I don't need, 10 years. My body's not there yet, but it doesn't negate me right now. But in 10 years, when you're in that moment, you'll be convinced as much as you're convinced right now, yep, this is who I am, the body. But from this standpoint, you clearly know that it's not necessary. So in other words, the I am is even before the new condition of the body. It's still true even before the conditions of the changing body that are ever going on. So again, the question is, why do I need the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita if I am, that is the final reality, the water, if that I am is always self-evident? Because the knowledge of who I am is not complete. It is not completely clear. Therefore, there is room for teaching. If it was clear, we would not need the Upanishads and nobody would be listening to this. But the fact that it is not clear, there is room for teaching. And for this very reason, Upanishads divides the one reality into two categories. What are these two categories? Subject and object. In other words, the one reality without a second, and the one reality without a second appearing as many. Now, in order to explain that one reality without a second, in reference to so many changes, so many forms, we then have to create these two categories, subject, object. Do you see now the relevance of this subject-object teaching? Okay. So now let's talk about the object. And let's talk about the object in reference to who I am not. Now, notice how at the beginning I started out with, there is no question of denying your body and saying, I am not this body, mind. Remember that? But now I'm saying, let's investigate reality and discover who I am not. Does that sound like a contradiction? Yes. So why do we do this? Because I started out with the highest vision, with the highest understanding. Now, to come to that understanding, you have to go through the process of neti, negation. So therefore, let's start out with the body. What is the body and so on? Okay, so how do we, so the statements that we make about I in reference to the body are statements like, I am tall, I am slim, I am dark, I am unattractive, I am attractive, and so on. Doesn't matter what words you use. So all of these attributes, they are called atyasa in Sanskrit. Atyasa just means I take the changing conditions of the body as myself. In other words, I superimpose the body characteristics onto my identity. And then I act as though it is me. You know, I treat myself attractive or I treat myself unattractive. So now let's ask, why am I other than the body? Other than the body? Well, for example, firstly, we can say the body can be objectified. That means it can be perceived. Now, what does this mean? To perceive something, it means you must be other than the perceived. You can't perceive your body unless you are other than what is being perceived. It's just pure logic. Another reason is because the body is constantly changing. Like in every minute, you're losing millions of cells, and millions of cells are being created. So if the I was the body, then you would have no connection to yesterday, because how many times has the body changed since yesterday? Millions and millions of cells have been created and died. But you do have a connection to yesterday. You have a connection to yesterday saying, oh, I had a headache. That's the body, right? I had a back pain. That was the physical body. Oh, I was so healthy yesterday. Today I feel lousy. That was the body. So in other words, you cannot be the conditions of the body, because to tell about the conditions of the body implies you must be other than those conditions. You're not impacted by those conditions. So in other words, I know of all of the changes that are taking place. Therefore, I must be free from the body changes to report the body changes. Again, logic. Another example, body is a collection of what? Body is a collection of cells. Now, which cell should I take from your physical body that says I am? Is it the cells in your knees, nails, teeth? Should I take some cheek cells, some cells in the buttock, some cells in the left leg, which elbow, bone marrow cell, some tissue cell, colon cell? Which cell should I take in order to find I? So, how many non-I cells do you have to add up to come to I am? Non-I cell plus non-I cell plus non-I cell plus non-I cell can never equal I am. Mathematics. Now, why do we then confuse? Okay, let's say it this way. Do you confuse yourself with branch or, chair in your room right now? No one's got an issue with that. You don't go to a psychologist. Well, maybe you do, confuse yourself with someone else, or maybe it does exist. But generally, consumed as a healthy mind, you don't confuse yourself with the chair you're sitting on, okay? So now the question is, then why do we confuse ourselves with our body? We now know we have no issue confusing ourselves with external objects. But when it comes to the body, we make that inherent confusion. Why is that? The answer is because when a person is born, everyone comes with a special relationship to one single object, and that is the body that is assigned to you. Yes, the mind also. Because that one special relationship is there, we cannot discern whether this is me or whether this is other than me. Whereas for every other object, we have no issue with this general discrimination. But with the body, it's a different story. So that special relationship that we all come with, you and I, is the very reason why we make that confusion. And now in reality, what is the body? It is an instrument for conducting life. But what happens? Even though we're given an instrument to conduct life, we end up on top of that identifying with that instrument. So we kind of, add an extra bonus, which we're not supposed to add. So what is the mistake that we make in reference to the body? The Katha Upanishad very beautifully says, it says that charioteer, that means the driver of the chariot, confuses him or herself with the chariot. And when I say charioteer, I'm actually talking about the intellect, which is not separate from where the knowledge, self-knowledge takes place. So the charioteer confused him or herself with the chariot. It's like me saying, when you get into your car, do you confuse yourself with the car? No. But you're the owner of the car. Whereas when it comes to the body, we lose that relationship. We mix that relationship up. The body, like a car, we're supposed to own it and know I am the owner. We end up tying its identity, its presence onto myself. And now I'm able to, not only am I now I am, but I am plus the body. So they get entangled together. Therefore, we have to figure out, I am not this instrument, but I am the owner of this instrument. Now, what about the senses? Why am I other than the senses? Okay, let's analyze this. So the capability of the senses changes over time, like your vision. Eyesight was very good some time long ago. Today, it is not as good. Hearing also, anything. Generally, we'll stick with hearing and eyes. So they're changing over time. But I am present to know the changing capability of the eye's vision. In other words, I have to be other than the changing eye vision or hearing in order to report the fact that they are, in fact, undergoing a change through the course of life. If I was entangled with them, I would never say, oh, I've lost my hearing. Oh, my eyes are, not as good as they were. You would never say that, because you would be that sense in that moment, every single moment. So you would never find anything wrong. You would never say, my senses are degrading through the years. Or if hearing is lost, you're not lost, right? You're the one in whose presence the hearing is reported to be lost. You already have no problems with losing taste, because when we're sick, we lose not only taste, but we also lose our smell. That doesn't mean you're gone. It just means in the presence of you, smell and taste is gone. So it has to be, so you're other than what is being reported to be degrading. And this is also another example why identifying with the senses actually causes unnecessary suffering in the old age. For example, some old people who are over-identified with their senses find it extremely challenging when the senses start to deteriorate over time, because the person cannot handle eye deteriorating, because the eye identity is placed into the senses, into the vision, into the hearing. Therefore, the person finds it very challenging to deal with myself degrading. So this is and then what do? They go, oh, it's extra pain, and now I'm not as sharp as I used to be. So it brings unnecessary pain. It's another reason why some refuse to wear a hearing aid, because it contradicts your identity of healthy hearing, right? I am healthy hearing, and now I'm supposed to put a hearing aid on. That contradicts the healthy me. So this is what happens when we put our eye in the senses, which is quite ironic, because you have no problem fixing a computer when its performance starts to degrade. But when it comes to fixing a hearing instrument or a vision instrument, when it starts to degrade, what do? We make extra complications. Why? Because the I am is tied into the senses. In other words, we're not factual about the senses, but more personal about the senses. So the summary of, yes, Mautik?
Actually, I wanted to make a point. Like when we see a car, so it's pratyaksha, right? We can see the car.
Yeah.
So that is why we can disassociate ourselves from the car and say that we are the owner. But
Yeah.
in the case of body, we can't see, it is not the pratyaks.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So what Mautik is saying is, because there's an external movement and it seems to be apart from this object, which is witnessing that movement, then we have no problem. Okay, so this object is still, it is static, it's not moving, and this object is moving. So then on the basis of that, there's obviously separation there. But when it comes to the body always goes wherever it is. So we always carry this body onto the self, and therefore we then always carry the superimposition onto the self. Thus, I'm always the body wherever I go. So the superimposition stays no matter where we take this physical instrument. So the summary of these senses is, since I can objectify the degrading or the improving condition of the sense organ, I must be thus different from them. What about the mind? Before we get into the mind, you first need to understand what is the mind made of. The mind in Sanskrit is just antahkarana. The antahkarana has 4 primary functions, and we need to understand exactly what each of them do. Otherwise, negation, neti, won't work. Therefore, the teaching is not going to take place. So first of all, the mind has first capacity, which is the capacity of emotions. This is the capacity that creates feelings, like I am sad, happy, doubtful, ecstatic, confident, and you can create a whole list of emotions that we undergo each day. So today, how many times have you felt something? 5, 10, more? Ongoing? Hundreds? We don't really know. But however many times that was, that is the capacity of that emoting system of the mind. Now, also the second part is the cognitive capacity of the mind. So if I ask you, what is 3 plus 5? The brain goes, 3 plus 5. Okay, 5, 1, must be 8. 13 plus 8. 13 plus 8. Okay, 20. 21. In other words, there's a thinking process going on. You're not now feeling into the answer. Let me feel 13 plus. Wow. In other words, it's a totally different experience when I ask you to think or to assess or to analyze something. That analysis, that calculation, that putting together facts using logic and rationale, that is the cognitive capacity. The capacity which makes you come to an understanding how 3 plus 5 equals 8. Not just memory, because memory is different now, but you need to understand how did I actually, because at some point, 1 plus 1 was hard. Do you remember that time? 1 plus 1? You don't remember? How about 9 times 5? I remember 9 times 5. Probably had some trouble in grade 3, I think. Or grade 4, plus minus. But now we take it for granted, right? In other words, at some point, if you trace back, these simple statements were so hard at some point, but we developed our cognitive capacity, which is now able to this day, not only assess basic numbers, but also much higher, more complex matters like the creation of the universe and the dispersion in reference to the total reality. All of that comes from this cognitive capacity, which is why we say in Vedanta, the intellect needs to be refined sufficiently for this knowledge to take place. Because an intellect that is still on this basic of just looking at just the basic, oh, let me move my pen from here to there. That is also cognition, isn't it? Because you need to actually move the pen. You need to put it on the right surface, but it's very simple. And then you have a little bit more sophisticated intellect, like just decrypting a genome string, and going, okay, well, here's what every part, here's what every strand deals with, and then you need to make some inferences, some perceptions, and then you need to calculate how does that now build proteins and so on. So that also requires intellect. And then you have the highest intellect, which is to understand the nature of I in reference to the total. So in other words, the intellect itself has layers. The emotions itself has layers. That's why today we have what's called emotional intelligence. So many books are written on this, how to develop your emotional intelligence in such a way as to create a balanced human being. So all of these sections of the mind have their own specific field of study, of improvement. Another field, the third capacity, is the memory. Now, the memory just means to remember events. Remember events that took place at some point in the past. If you didn't have the memory, in fact, I saw a show the other day of a man who had a 2-minute memory. It was a 2 or something minute memory. And every time he is away from his wife, he comes back 2 minutes later, and it's like he sees his wife for the first time in 20 years. So just imagine that. I don't know, it would be annoying or exciting, but I don't know how that is. That's their stuff. So memory also is highly important, because without memory, you wouldn't know where you put your pen, how to turn on the computer again, how to launch Zoom. It will be just the most frustrating thing to have to look through a list of things. Okay, step 1, press button. But you have to now also remember what button even means. So to remember what a button means also requires memory. How to move the mouse, and that ability of moving the mouse from one corner to the other, that requires cognition. But that also requires memory, because memory is that capacity which has made you move the mouse before. So you have some kind of experience doing that. Now, memory also has a subset called unconscious. Unconscious is the impressions from the past which govern your present decisions. Unconscious means those events which have happened in the past, in this life, which as a result now govern the person that I am today. In other words, they create generalizations about life. They create impulsive judgments. So the person that you are today is just a series of these unconscious impressions. That means that if I was taught in a certain way by parents in a culture, then I will take that, and that will be my way of transacting with the world. Now, the last one is the I sense. This is the most trickiest to understand, because we often confuse this with I am. The I sense is called the ahankara. What is this I sense? Because it is crucial to understand this, so you don't confuse this with the final reality I am. The ahankara, it gives that sense of continuity, or connects all of the associated events that have happened to your body and to your mind. All of the experiences in your life, you say, okay, I have a life, and that life is so much. And I know that I was that at some point in 10 years ago, and I've also experienced this, and I've experienced that to my body, and I went through this course, and then I figured this out, and I had this breakthrough, and I went over there, and I met this person. So what is in common here? There's a sense of continuity. There is a thread that connects one event to the other, and it all comes back to whom? To me. In other words, when you say I have a life, the question is now, what makes that possible to say that that life belongs to me? Ahamkara. In other words, the ahamkara is that thread which connects all of your cognitions, all of your memories, all of your unconscious, and it brings it present now. now. This is why when people sometimes will play with these psychedelics, you know, they'll ingest some like LSD, and they will say what? Oh, I lost my sense of individuality. What does this even mean? I lost my sense of thread. That thread which connects all of my past problems and my experiences, that was temporarily subsided by the induction of this LSD or whatever it is. And then they say all of my problems went away. In other words, the ahamkara was temporarily subdued. Therefore, there was no connecting link to any of those memories which I've experienced, to all of the pains that I've undergone. Therefore, the person feels free. They feel, you know, like released. So it's not like, you know, you had this, it's not like it was lost forever. It was just temporarily suspended. So when you say, I lived for so many years, 50 years. Now, some person is going to say, yeah, but that's your memory. No. Your memory is that part which distinctly says what happened 10 years ago. But the fact that that event is traced back to this person now in the present, that is ahamkara. Is that difference clear? Okay, good. So whenever you say, I have a life, that is the ahamkara. Now the problem is we place our I am identity into one of these or all of these 4 functions of the mind. So why did I now just explain these 4 functions? Because in order to separate subject from object, you first need to know what you are separating from. If I just say separate from the mind, you're not, you know, you're other than your mind. But you need to first know what functions does the mind have in order so that I don't put my I am back into that function. In other words, having spoken about memory, now you know, okay, so memory is that part which makes me remember distinct experiences. Okay, so that is the function of the mind. Okay, so the ahamkara, that sense of individuality, is that principle which makes me know that there is a person who has lived so many years and experienced a life that has lasted for so many years. Okay, so that is also not I. So why am I other than the mind? Let's ask it this way. Why am I other than the mind? The first reason is the status of all 4 functions that I just explained are fleeting in nature. Memory is fleeting. You remember and then you don't. You have to think about your life. That is also ahamkara. It's fleeting and then it's gone. Cognition, you calculate something and then it's gone. So all of them have something in common. They are fleeting. While in the presence of non-fleeting I, the fleeting states are recognized. Yes, Robert.
It just occurred to me, Andre, that you've just demolished one of the foundations of Western philosophy, which is the Descartes' cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. In that statement, there's an assumption that the I that thinks is the same as I am. Well, you're pointing out it's like a subset of it.
Yeah, good, Robert. So, so it's bringing up this common statement, right? I think, and because I think I am. So this means that if I don't think, then you would just go out of existence, basically. So what Vedanta is saying, because I am, there is thinking. Because I am, in the presence of I am, the function of cognition, the function of emotion, the function of memory, the function of continuity of having gone through a series of experiences is. So it's a total paradigm reversal. Yes, Robert.
So this is really important for me. I've just got it for the first time, I think. It's a reversal of the process. Normally we say, I think, therefore I am, which is the object I that thinks proves I am. It reverses the focus on the I am as subject. I'll put it to you more clearly in writing, but
we'll talk more about this in reference to silence. I want to actually mention this. So all thoughts are fleeting. That's another reason why, because I asked the question, why am I other than the mind? Because thoughts are fleeting. Now, if the thought was if the thought was you, then it would stick to you forever. So if I say to you now, think of an elephant, and you're like, okay, I got an elephant. And then from that moment on, you will never be able to think I'm hungry, or I'm thirsty, or I want to go to sleep, because you would be an elephant itself. Your whole world will be just that one big elephant. But you know that's not true. In other words, before the thought was there, I was true. While the thought was there, I am true. After the thought goes away, I am still true. I am still present to all three conditions of the thought: before it comes, while it lasts, and after it goes. So this is the reason why, by the way, we need a decently clean mind to grasp this reality. Because if the mind is wallowing in thoughts of life, the challenges of life, then it's just not going to be interested in this subject-object inquiry. So there is a process that takes place before the teaching comes in. And that's why we've gone through this process in these previous sessions. Now, let's talk about the misconceptions. What are some misconceptions of this teaching? The first one is I am silence. That's a common teaching. In that case, if you were silence, then if thought comes, which is opposite silence, then I should go away. Right? In other words, I am present in the presence of thoughts and in the absence of thoughts also. I never went away. It's because I am that there is absence of thoughts. Because I am, there is thoughts that are undergoing changes in different combinations of memories, cognitions, and emotions. The other misconception is you must eliminate your mind. Now, the mind is the only instrument that you have to figure out this irreducible reality. That's the only refuge you have to figure things out. So where's the question of eliminating the mind? In fact, to even say eliminate the mind, that means you also now have to eliminate your memories. So for a person to say eliminate your mind, technically they shouldn't be saying that, because if they eliminated their mind, they wouldn't know the English language in order to tell you to eliminate your mind. Therefore, the mind is important and it needs to be decently clear and staying sharp so that it can assimilate the fullness of this vision. The other misconception is to say, or let me ask you now, this is where I want to hear some comments. What is the problem with saying, I am not the body mind? What could be some problems, some potential dangers of saying that? Yes, unmute, please.
Not taking care of the body mind.
Yeah, Lloyd, not taking care.
Not taking care of the body and mind because you aren't that, so you don't feel concerned about it.
Good. Not taking care. Okay. Anything else? That's the body. What about in reference to the mind? Yes, Sundaram and Robert.
I think it's a means of negation when they use this. I'm not the mind. I'm not the body. But if people took it in a different context, then they will neglect the body and the mind. So, for example, you need to be healthy, for example, to continue to pursue with the study of Vedanta or to realize yourself. You have to have a healthy mind. So, but if you say, if I'm not the mind, I'm not the body, I think people have to understand the context that it is in reference to something which is permanent.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the consciousness of the Atman.
Yeah, okay.
So that's what I'm trying to say. Yep.
Okay, good. Anything else? I am not the body mind. Yes, Robert.
I think once you say that, you create a duality, because if all is one, you are the body and mind as well as.
Yeah.
Conscious permeates everything.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's another one. Yeah, I would just put that in a slightly different way. It stops any further curiosity into the nature of reality, and any means to reconcile the total reality with this body or mind. It just stops that. It says, well, if I'm not the body and mind, so in that case, I don't need to now look into this body and mind. I can just discard it. Okay. Okay, so so you'll disown it, basically. You'll disown your body. You won't take care of your mind. You'll just like be, an unnecessarily lazy person in the society, because as Robert said, now the reality is whole, and then there's no reason for me to be here. So it just justifies a lot of excuse and laziness. And this inquiry is not about dissociating the body and the mind. It's got nothing to do with that. It's only about understanding or putting the body and mind in the right place. That's all. And by the way, if anyone is from India, we need to start an hour earlier at 1:00 p.m. because we just had a time zone change in Australia. I'm just saying that because I see someone logging in. So if you logged in late, you can still see the video, which I will put up in a few hours, or by tomorrow. Okay. Now, there is a school of, it's a subset, it's called Neo-Advaita, and I'm sure you probably heard of that. Now, Neo-Advaita versus traditional, there's a huge difference. Neo-Advaita basically is about disowning your body-mind in one level or the other, at least implying it. So what it does is it creates this imaginary reality, and then you end up living in it. Now, why do I say imaginary? Because there is no question of exclusion when it comes to the whole reality. So what Neo-Vedanta says, you're not this body-mind, you are this different reality. And then I end up going, okay, so I put all of my focus on that, but then I exclude this presence of this body and mind. And that creates this imaginary reality. So anything that is exclusion, anything that works through exclusion, forces the mind to think in imagination and thus set up a private bubble. And it's very hard to detect. It can last for years until someone points out that it's not you don't need to exclude anything here. Just put it in the right place. The wave doesn't need to negate itself. Just understand, yes, there is a form. It does act like a form. It does have limitations of a form. It does have emotions, which is okay. That's how the laws of this universe are. It does bring you with these emotions. It does have memories. It does have cognitions. But I don't have to identify. It's not about now, okay, so I'm not that. You just have to understand that is one order of reality, but I am more than that. So we're just trying to understand what is that moreness. Whereas traditional is, as I said, you're more than this body mind. And you need to understand that accurately what it means. Therefore, for that is required what? A sharp mind, which is why Vedanta does require some maturity. It does require thinking, analysis on your part. It's not just about sitting and listening and going, cool, I've done my session, now let's go on with life. It does require follow-up on your part. So now the question that we need to ask is, then who am I? If I'm not this body, if I'm not these four functions of the mind, and I'm not the senses, then what am I? What the Upanishads say is, I am the presence in whose presence all conditions of these four functions of the mind and the senses and the body, all of those conditions are known to be taking place. In other words, I am the presence which never comes and goes. And because it never comes and goes, in reference to that presence, I can validate all of those coming and going changes occurring within the body, within the aging, degrading senses, within the ever fluctuating conditions of the mind. Okay. So I would like to conclude with that, because next session, what I would like to do is expand on what we have listened to today. Because when teaching, what you do is you don't go much technical, you go little by little. So next session, I will provide more technicalities in reference to what we have spoken. This session was just meant to give you a general overview. We still have to address questions like, what specifically is this presence, which I said, this presence in whose presence all conditions are known to be taking place. We have to specifically see how that presence is not different between you and I, and how is that presence also true for the entire universe, and what is the cause of the universe. So these questions also have to get addressed. And what is that cause before even the Big Bang? So this is a total vision that has to be assimilated before we can, before we can move on to chapter 10 and then continue with that. Okay. Any discussions? Let me put. Yes, Nautic.
Can we say that we are more than the body and the mind? Is that statement correct, or?
Yeah, you're much more than this body mind, because I didn't now negate anything by saying that. Yeah. See, just say that I'm much more than just body mind. It's not a question of now negation. It's only a question of inquiring into that moreness. And this inquiry that we will do is next week, specifically in technical details. Okay, anything else?
Question maybe not relevant for this session. I'm not very clear about the difference between the Manomaya Kosha and then the Anandamaya Kosha. I mean, maybe it might come next session, but I'm not sure. But I just want to see your views of how do you explain that?
The Anandamaya Kosha?
No, Anandamaya Kosha and Manomaya Kosha.
No, the Anandamaya, the causal body, the Anandamaya Kosha.
Yeah.
Okay, this is, because see, now I have to explain it's not relevant to this section, because I need to cover Maya, Ishvara, and Brahman. When we get to Ishvara, I may include the causal body, but for now it is not appropriate. Yeah, Vedanta is very strict on the order and when it actually starts to use these words. If you use them too early, it will break the potential teaching.
Fair enough.
Andre?
Yes.
Yeah, can we go back to memory just for a moment?
Yes, please.
I guess I'm not entirely clear on the extent to which memory is a function of the causal body versus being a function of the mind and intellect, or I guess a combination across. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how do we overlay the idea of like long-term versus short-term memory into the subtle and causal body framework? Because you were talking about memory being part of the mind, or like within the intellect, we just know that 9 times 5 is 45. Where do those things sit? Is it sort of in the causal body level, or is there a subtle body thing? I'm sort of not entirely clear.
Okay, we don't need to include causal and subtle body. We're just focusing on the mind. The mind, one of its functions is memory. And see, if you look at the mind, it's not like now there's these four rooms out there in the causal body. It is the one mind that, in order to explain how it works, we just segment it into 4 different functions. So it's not like memory is different from cognition and cognition is different from emotions. They're all one mind. So when it comes to memory, it is just that process, a function which helps the human being to navigate the world when they are, when they're transacting with this world. And I said, yes, now there is short and long-term memory, but that is also the brain. But when it comes to just general memory, it is a principle which stores individual parts of your life, which you can then access and thus save yourself time in the present. In fact, the whole language you're using now is nothing but a function of the memory. But you also need to put the words together. You can't just start churning out English words. So you need to put them in the right order. So that order is through the process of your cognition, of your intellect. And also when you speak, you sometimes have this kind of like, lofty, feeling about what you say. So there is also now emotion coming in. So all of these functions are working simultaneously.
So I guess you're talking about mind in the context of it being the mind and intellect, not separately, because I always think of cognition being part of the intellect, but you're sort of talking about memory as the combined mind intellect. and being
Yeah.
part of that. Is that fair?
Yes, yes. So,
Yeah, cool.
yeah, okay. Okay, I'll tell you why. The more important reason is because if you don't now divide these categories, then when it comes to the process of inquiring who I am not, to negate these temporarily so that I may arrive to who I am, I need to first know what exactly am I negating. If I just say I'm negating one big mind, and you don't know what the mind even means, then you're not, how can you even negate that? So we have to tell you exactly, okay, so the memory, not I. The cognition, not I. The impressions, that means the person that I am today, the way I speak, the way I'm answering you, the way you talk to the others, all of that is impressions. That is also part of the memory. The way you feel, also part of the memory. So it just educates you so that you can then perform an accurate self-inquiry through negation, through neti. Yeah, that's why we always put it into these categories, and then we tell you what they are. Also in reference to the mind, because I knew these questions are going to come in reference to the mind. Next session will be majorly about the mind, because the mind is crucial to understand, because it is the most intricate to separate from I am.
Andre?
Yeah.
In the snake rope example, is it right to say that the snake is a superimposition on the rope?
Okay. Does anyone know what Thomas is now bringing up? Snake rope. Are we all clear on that?
Yep.
Yep.
So when the snake is recognized as the rope, in the example, the snake is gone. In the example, the snake is gone. If we recognize the mind as a superimposition, destruction or removal of the superimposition, does that just mean I disidentify with the mind and identify with Brahman? I remove my identity with the mind. The mind isn't actually physically destroyed, as in the snake rope example.
Yeah, the snake rope example, see again, so you have to know the context of the example. You cannot now take the snake rope and then bring it into the mind. The snake rope example is meant to demonstrate that until I recognize the reality, the superimposition will remain. But it is not like that for the mind. It's not like, oh, okay, so the mind is not I, and then suddenly now the mind goes away. The mind doesn't go away. The mind remains. So the snake rope has a context, but it simply doesn't apply in this example. The snake rope will apply when we talk about the macrocosmic, the Ishvara. I may bring it up then. Yeah, so the reason I'm saying this is, see, this is a common thing that happens in Vedanta is you want to bring all of these examples and now tie them into what we're talking about right now. So you need to be very specific and stay within the framework of the teaching. This is where it all goes wrong. Taking a little bit of that, let's bring it into the teaching. A little bit of that into the teaching.
Yeah, I was just confused because you said adhyasa is taking the changing conditions of the body as myself. And from my days in the neo-Advaita world, I did hear things such as destruction of the superimposition or removal of the superimposition. And I just wanted to know what destruction of the superimposition was in reference to taking the changing conditions of my body, of the body as myself.
Yeah, okay, so we can just put it this way. You're just you're putting the mind and you're putting the body, putting the senses in the right place. The wave is never going to destroy anything because there's nothing to destroy. It's simply going to recognize the forms and it's going to put them where they belong without identifying. Once you understand, you no longer make the mistake of superimposition. It is not a matter of destruction, even though we can say destruction as in, once I understand, it is as though destroyed, but nothing was destroyed because it is one reality appearing as the many. There's no question of destruction.
Thank you, that clears it up.
Okay. All right, I will see you next week. Let's close. Oh, by the way, I have an announcement. I would like to, I know there's some more people coming up. I would like to just say hello to you personally. So after I close, please stay maybe just 5 more minutes because it's not 8 o'clock yet. And I just want to, ask you how you are and get to know your name. Okay, I'm going to close now. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.